Now the next slot is an official slot, and it is about the administration and the storefront. Administration is a term that we coined with Shopware 6, and internally, if a developer says a backend, talking about the Shopware 6 administration, you know, he gets some trouble. Okay, no, not really, but it's administration, not backend. Who is talking about the admin in the storefront? Tobias Berge, Tobias Hills, and Christian Rades. Can't translate that, but anyway. And Toby is one of those guys. You give him a design, something, an idea, and he's one of those magicians that can take an idea and somehow breathe life into it, and then it becomes a reality in your browser. These guys, you know. I'm a developer. I can make things working, but not beautiful. He can do both. And then there is Christian. Let's just say he is not afraid to break things and put them together in a better way. So, without further ado, Admin and Storefront by Tobias and Christian.
Thank you. Welcome. As you might have guessed, this talk is as well about Shopware 6 as the other ones, and I think I'm breathing a bit into my mic, so I'm adjusting it. So hopefully that's better. Right. Today's topic is introducing the new storefront and administration. But first, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Christian Rades. I've been working at Shopware since 2017, so not as long as others here. I'm a core developer, and you can find me on GitHub, but please don't look too closely. I haven't done much in a long time. So, your stage.
Yeah. My name is Tobias Berge. I'm working at Shopware since 2014. I am also a core developer, and I do, like Niklas pointed out, mostly front-end stuff. And you can also find me on GitHub under the name Tobias Berge.
Thank you. So, we'll have to sadly say goodbye to Tobias for now.
Yes.
Because he will take the latter part of the presentation. Right now, we split it into two parts, and the first one is all about the administration. Okay, the future. You've all heard it today. We are the future. You have to make it yourself. So what do a lot of people say the future is all about? Headless. Headless everything. And just as well, you can use Shopware headless. But let's be frank, you know, the user interface isn't that great of a headless application. So we got together and designed new front ends for both shop users and shop owners. Why am I saying, or why is the slide saying, that the administration and the storefront are basically the same? Because they are both looking at the same data, just from different perspectives. So, that's basically what this is all about. Let's get started. Okay. As you might have heard, the administration will be, or is, a single-page application. I guess you're all familiar with that term, and we decided to do that because we already had a focus on the backend as a separate application. And we just took that thought and worked it unto completion with the new administration. You know, it's no longer just half a separate application, but right now it's a complete contained application on the client that talks over the internet to the backend through an API. And so, this is our basic layout of the administration. We got 3 main folders and 3 main areas of the administration. For once, we got the core. This contains all the application-specific logic. We got the app. This one contains all the globally useful components and UI elements. And we got the module. This one contains all the modules. This is the dependency of those things. So the modules, of course, need all the components we got in apps. And the application needs to know the core logic. But the difference is that modules is, the administration you can see and you can touch. Application is more like a miscellaneous container for all the components and parts you need. And this also separates the application and the modules from the core, because the applications and the modules also depend on our chosen front-end framework, Vue. So, let's talk a bit about Vue. Vue is a front-end framework that is in itself very lean. That's why we choose it. It represents mostly the view layer of an application. And many of you will think of Vue as a single entity. But there are actually several core and community libraries we're using. So, for one, we got the Vue router. This is used for client-side routing, and as you will see later, is actually quite a good way to structure the new application and route between different modules and components. Then, we're using a community plugin, the Vue Internationalization. This enables us to quickly and without breaking any kind of flow, change the language of the administration and all the strings we're using there. And last but not least, we also choose to use Vuex to manage the internal state of the application. Basically things like errors and timers, stuff like that. But now I told you a bit about Vue. Let's start. This is just an example from the administration, and the cool thing that Vue brings is not only stuff like a virtual DOM, but also reactivity. And as you can see, as I change the content of the input field, it gets directly synced to the top of the bar. So if you pull that through the whole application, it feels very responsive. And now, let's examine a bit closer how Vue thinks about data flow. Because that's an important part of the application, right? You got a parent component. This is the one above them. And a parent contains several childs. And Vue is very opinionated about that data flow. So we have our reactive data binding. This basically means what I just shown you. You change an input field and you want to bubble that change to somewhere else. The only way this is possible is downwards, towards the parent. And you can do that just as you see on the slides with a simple HTML element and the command vmodel. The vmodel attribute binds the given attribute of the component to this input field, so it gets updated on every change. But now you're thinking, how do I get my data back up? Vue also has a way to do this. It's called events. And as you can see, it's again just a simple HTML button, but you register an on-click handler. So this is basically the code as it's written in the parent. You have registered a click event that's thrown by the button to a function in the parent component. This is the on-button press. And of course, this doesn't work just with HTML elements. This does also work with all kinds of your own components. Speaking of components, components are a great and modular way to extend the administration and, well, applications in general. So let's go through the steps you need to create one of your own. This one is called SW Alert, and it's, a simple example. As you see, we have on the left side the the structure of this component, and on the right side the code. And one important fact is that the folder has the same name as the component, so Webpack can register it all. Okay, first line in our code, we import the component factory from the global Shopware application. This again calls back to our core architecture, to our core components, because this is extended with our own functionality and is not just creating a simple view element. Then we import simply the template, more on that later, and the styles. Okay. Now, to actually have a usable component, you call the register function of the factory and give it just a name and a configuration object. This configuration object can contain the layout of the, or not strictly speaking the layout, but more or less the programmatic layout of the component. We got props, which are short for properties, and these are like parameters for your component. And in this case, we defined a component called variant. And Vue is so kind and enables us some rudimentary type hinting and verification, so we can make sure that the variant prop gets only called with strings, and we also said that it's not required. So for non-required properties, it's a best practice to give a default, in this case, well, default. Okay, a last thing, you also want to use it. So this is basically how you call it in the parent component. And as you can see, you just pass the properties as if they were simple HTML attributes, and Vue will take it from there and just do it. Okay, now the template. You can see this is a Twig template. And I guess some of you are familiar with Twig, so there's nothing more to that. Except we're using Twig.js. So the really important part of Twig.js is that we are using these blocks to make our components extensible. We cannot use, in the administration at least, the logic and the logic components of Twig. For example, you can't use for loops or if conditions. You will have to do this through Vue. Speaking of Vue, here we got a second class attribute. But this time it is prefixed by a colon. This colon means that the attribute will be completely interpreted by Vue, and so we pass to it not a simple value, but a normal JavaScript templating string. And the variant we're using in this templating string simply refers to the attribute of the overlaying component. And again, you also want to input some of the data from your element into the component itself, normal HTML. So that's what this slot keyword is for. The slot element basically takes everything you pass as content to your component and renders it inside your component. Okay, last but not least, the styles. We are using Sass, as you already heard, especially the SCSS kind of Sass, so we don't have that weird syntax, but actual understandable CSS-like syntax. And there is nothing much to talk about, but I'd still like to draw your attention to this import. We're importing this mystic variables file. As it turns out, this time we thought clearly about colors and made a kind of style guideline available to all the developers through variables. so that all your components look as if they belong to the administration without any guesswork on your part. And if we decide to change something, like for example, I don't know, our off-white isn't off enough, we can just change it, and the change bubbles through your own components without you having to go back into the code and change things. Okay, now, this SCD, it's all about journeys, as you can see on our t-shirts. And so I brought with me quite a rough one. This is an expedition to the ISS, you know, number 41 to be precise. And as you see, lots of people, and especially lots of people from different countries and backgrounds. We've got Russians, Germans, Americans, and they all speak different languages. Now, if you're such an exclusive club such as NASA, you simply have enough money to train them all to speak every language. We don't have that luxury as software developers. Our software needs to be understandable by our audience. We can't just tell them, you know, just learn Russian, no big deal. And that's where our Internationalization Plugin comes in. Because to simply replace a piece of text to the according language, we are using the globally registered $TC function, and I'll just take it from here. So let's look at the snippets, because there's another cool thing. They are simply JSON files. And as you can see, the layout of the JSON file for, you know, the British, English, and the German is exactly the same. They don't change at all, and you simply specify the actual path through the JSON in the TC function. See, so SW product general info message, and here in the snippet you can see there's an object called SW project, an object called general, and then the message. So we actually did a lot of work with the components, and so you can see we have them for everything. We got data grids, we got buttons, error messages, even a text editor. All you want. But with that many components, you need some kind of overview. And so, as you already heard in the tech keynote, we built the component library. This contains real-life working examples of all the components that you can simply click through and even change settings to try them out, integrate them, etc. Now, some of you may be asking now, yeah, that's all cool, but what if we want to do our own stuff? You want more components. Well, of course, you can have more components. We have a simple mechanism of extending existing components. So, it's as easy as these not quite 3 lines of code. The global component factory also contains a function called extend. To create a completely new component that is based on an existing one, you simply pass it the name of your new component, you pass it the name of the component you want to create, and then you give it a configuration object, and these configuration objects get merged back into the component you extended from, so that you can just override selectively functions to have kind of the same functionality as the component you wanted to extend, but you still did your changes and have a completely separate component. If you want to hook into existing components and change some logic in them, it's basically the same way. You just have to replace the extend call with an override call. So, I said it quite some times. We're using modules in Shopware 6. And this is a term that's basically just used internally in our administration. And they are the place where you actually put components. So this is basically how you use what you just learned. So again, a snapshot of the administration. a simple overview. And as you can see on the right side, you have basically the data, you have the stuff you want to show. And on the left side, you've not only got a menu, but as highlighted, these menus have points. And these points, those are the modules. So let's take a look at the product module. Yeah. Again, a module is basically a folder that contains an index JavaScript file. And it is again managed by a global constructor. As you can see here, the pages themselves get imported into the module itself. And how they are used, we'll see in a little while. Next up, the actual stuff you want your module to describe. You know, name, title, just fluff, basically, so the user feels welcome. Then we also have the snippets we imported up there in the 5th and 6th line. And there we've simply defined that for the language German and for the language British English, we want to use those JSON objects I've just showed you. Next up, the latter half of this long file. We have routes. These are the actual bit that determine how your page looks. As you can see, we have an index route, quite obviously. That is the one that shows you all the products. It has a path, simply index, and it has associated one of the page components we loaded further up. And then in the detail route, you see that you actually pass an ID. So you can see in detail the product you want to display to the user. So, and this is how you use it. Basically, when the button on edit is pressed, the router gets called and it push method adds the given route to the path and also gives it the parameters you want, so that when this event gets triggered, the router view changes itself to the actual page component. So it completely gets replaced by the stuff you want to show. There is also a more familiar way, and this is simply the router link element. It works kind of like, you know, a standard HTML a reference, a link. So you can click on that and the route gets changed. And the last bit, this is navigation. This determines where in the menu your module will be shown. In this case, you also give it a label and a color, because obviously we have this awesome design system that gives the user an idea where they are and associates it with a color. And we at Shopware, we incremented the positions of those items in tenor increments, so that you can hook yourself in between if you want to extend it. Next up, data handling. Okay, now we talked quite a bit about how the administration will handle the information it contains itself. Basically how views are built, how things interact, stuff like that. But it's all worth nothing if you can't actually talk to the backend. This gets done through our data handling. And it's not an easy problem, because you basically have two worlds. On the one hand, you have the client, and on the other hand, you have the backend. And you need to keep your models, you know, the way your entities relate to each other, what kind of information they contain, you need to keep that in sync. And not only do you have to keep that in sync, but you also have to keep that in sync across languages, because the backend obviously is written in PHP and the front end is a JavaScript application. But to conquer this problem, we choose to basically just use one common language, and that is we translated all the functionality of the DAL that you've already seen into JavaScript, so that you can use the front-end data handling just as you would the back-end. Okay, now to our example. Just a simple showcase component, and right, here, the component state. This is a little feature we haven't talked about before, but the data function of a view component just returns the initial state of a component, so that it is always predictable in what kind of state your component gets built the first time it is called. Next up, the factory. Now you may ask yourself, why have we put this piece of abstraction there, right? Why do we have to use a factory to create a media factory in this case? And the answer is, it completely depends on the Open API schema. So all the kinds of entities you build in the back end, their relationships, their data, they get synced automatically to the front end and to the repositories, so that when the repository fetches data, it gets put in the same way and in the same relations as in the backend. Okay, now the meaty bit. Here is where we actually query data from the backend. First up, we create a criteria object. A criteria object is basically just a kind of filter for the results you get from the backend. Then you extend it by adding two filters, a equals filter. This basically means that file extension has to be JPEG, and a contains filter. This just ensures that file name contains shoes. So we basically just want some pictures of shoes. And to limit that, we just add a limit 10 items, no problem. Once we've built the criteria object, we'll pass it to the repository to search it. And let's take a look at how this would work in PHP. As you can see, pretty much exactly the same. You build a criteria object, you add those two filters, you set a limit, and off it goes to the repository. And as you can also see, both cases use a context. So just as in the back end, in the front end, you also want to give the repository information about user and user languages, etc. Now, it's no good just reading data. You also want to change data. And I also got an example for this. This is, again, a simple example. It should rename some file names when you push a button. Okay, here, as a property, we just pass a standard UUID. Nothing wild, just a string. You set it required, so obviously you can't fetch anything from the backend without knowing its ID unless you're querying it. And then you fetch it. This has already a shortcut. It's the get method, so you don't have to go through all that stuff with a criteria object. You can simply get the ID, give it the context again, because it's important, and then, as is normal in JavaScript, you get back a promise. In this case, in the promise, we change the name, as is given here. We just change the hyphens to underscores, and then we'll write back the changes explicitly through the save functionality of the repository. And this also would write back all relations that have changed. So this is all handled by the front end, by the data handling in itself. So, to close my part, I want to show you the dev tools, because frankly, they are awesome. To debug stuff, you want the functionality to precisely inspect all the state, the components, the layout, stuff like that. So here's a little demonstration. And as you can see, when you change a value in the actual running application, it gets synced in real time to the dev tools, so you can see exactly what state your components are in. And not only can you see what state your components are in, you can also see how they are ordered and stuff like a history of all events in the Vuex store. You can have a history of all events in general. And this enables you to quite easily debug your application and find potential flaws in your design. So, thank you very much. This was my part. But now, it's time for the new storefront, and this is presented by Tobias Berge.
So, thank you, Christian. Okay, so let's talk about the new storefront. But before we get started, I just want to say thank you to our partners from Connexco and Das ist Web, because they made the new storefront possible. Without them, we wouldn't have achieved the new storefront at this point. And yeah, they worked really close with us, and they did a whole ton of work on this. So thank you at this point. So, first of all, I want to talk about the technologies we are using in the new storefront and basically why we choose these technologies. So, first up, we have Bootstrap 4. This is our front-end framework. And yeah, Bootstrap is basically one of the largest, if not the largest, component libraries out there for front ends. And yeah, we choose it because it's really well known. And next up, we have Twig. And I want to point out that we are not using Twig.js in the storefront. This is the real Twig, if you want, from Symfony. We use Sass as our CSS preprocessor, just like in the administration as well. And we use ECMAScript 6 features today, so you can use all cool sorts of stuff like classes and things like this. And this all gets bundled and minified via Webpack. So we wanted to make life easier for you, because as developers you have to keep a lot of stuff, there's a lot of stuff you have to keep in your head, and we wanted to make it easier for you to develop cool templates and themes. So as you can see in the screenshot, there are already a ton of Shopware 5 themes available right now, and we want to keep this success with Shopware 6. And we want to use well-known standards for that, rather than creating our own stuff where it's not actually needed. And we want to require less special knowledge that you guys have to bring in. And this all should be more growth for this Shopware theme topic as well. So where do I find the new storefront actually? So it is another component, just like the administration, and you can find it right in the platform repository within the source folder. So let's have a closer look right now. So if we open this up, you can see this resources folder. This comes from Symfony. It is a Symfony convention. We don't have to care about it too much. And don't worry, I don't want to bore you with all the folders right there. As you see, there's a modules folder which contains the internet basically. And you have this, you have two important folders I want to point out, and this is the source folder as well as the views folder. And if we take a look inside the source folder, you can find all JavaScript parts and all the styling. So, but first of all, let's have a look at the views folder, because that's probably the place you have to look first when you want to work with templates, because these are the real Twig templates right there. So if we open this up, you can find this directory structure, and we try to find a really neat way to sort things up there. And as you can see, there is a component folder, for example. This contains reusable components, just kind of similar in the administration. And there's a folder called layout. This contains all your basic layout stuff like the header of the shop, the footer, and things like this. And you have a page folder, which is a concrete controller, just like a checkout or product detail page. So this can be found inside the page folder. And there's one more thing I want to point out, and this is this base.html.twig file. And this contains, the foundation or the skeleton of the storefront. So if we have a look at this, you can see your doc type, your HTML tag, and things like this. So this is basically the foundation and pretty much gets imported by all other templates. So this is the wrapper. Okay, so let's have a look at one of the templates. So if you have worked with Twig or Smarty before, with such template engines in general, this might look very familiar to you. I just wanted to point out again that we have wrapped this all up inside this Twig blocks, so you also have the possibility to extend everything as you want. So this is just an example of a simple logo file which gets imported to display the shop logo. But what if you want to extend a template? So this also might look quite familiar to you, but there is one simple thing I want to point out, and this is one difference according the default Twig behavior, and this is SW extends. So we are extending a block here called page product detail name. So we want to extend the product name of the detail page. And we are not doing this by extends, but SW extends. So what does this actually mean, and what does it make in the background? So in Shopware, we use multi-inheritance support, which means, for example, when a plugin and a theme both want to extend the same part or the same block, Shopware has to figure out which part comes first, which template or plugin comes first. And this is all handled via this SW extends. So I just wanted to point that out because this is basically the only difference to the standard Twig, just that you have seen that. So you don't have to worry about it too much during your development because it is basically the same as the standard extends. And for including templates, it's pretty much the same, just SW include, and the functionality is provided by Shopware automatically. There's one other cool thing in the Twig world we have provided to you, and this is a new cool icon system. And as you can see, there is a custom Twig tag called SW icon, and you can give it a name and some additional styling properties like a color or large icon and all sorts of stuff. And what this actually gives you is an inline SVG. So this means it's all handled by Twig, and you only get inline SVG icons right in the place you want to put it. And you don't have extra, font hacks or additional requests for additional files. It's all being cached and handled by Twig. And basically Google PageSpeed will be really happy about this. So when it comes to fetching data, so the data which is displayed in the storefront has to come from somewhere. And this comes from basic Symfony controllers. So as you can see here, this is the product controller, and it extends the storefront controller. And this is actually the action which provides the product detail. And I want to point out this product page loader. This is actually a service, and this is responsible for actually bringing the data to the template. And in the last part, you can see this render storefront command, and this render storefront is the counterpart to this SW extends thing. So this is also handling this multi-inheritance in the background. So normally you would see this render function instead of this render storefront. So this is also a method from us. So if we take a look inside this page, You don't have to keep this all in mind. I just briefly want to show you what's happening there. And so this is the load function, and as you can see, there is a product ID which is provided from the request. There is a function to find the best variant for it, and there's a product load function, and there's some configuration stuff going on, and there's also a business event which got thrown when this stuff is happening, and the page gets returned in the end. And you can simply access this by Twig inside this dot notation, and you can access the page object and then the product, and in this example you can just display the name. So it is no surprise right there, quite straightforward. So let's talk a little bit about translations. Christian already pointed out that this is a really important topic. And we also have, obviously, translations in the Storefront, and those are the interface translations. I also brought you an example right here. And as you can see, this is just a simple block with a div element, and inside there's the actual translation. So in this part, it is a Twig function. And as you can see, this kind of like magical string, which is representing a object structure, and then there is this translation modifier with this pipe thing. And what this is actually the default Symfony translation mechanism. And this is also handled with JSON files in the background, so it is pretty similar to the administration as well. So you don't have to learn two things when you do the Storefront part and the administration part. So, and yeah, this is just some messages for the footer, and there's actually a lot more going on in this file, just to give you an example how this looks in general. Okay. So now about the styling and CSS part. I just dropped you an example there of the styling, like folder structure. And this is kind of special because we structured this after the Sass 7-1 naming pattern. That might sound very fancy, but what this actually is a convention from the Sass community which guides you how to sort your styles in a nice and clean way. And yeah, we stick to that and use that, and we think it's a really great way of doing it. And as you can see, it is quite similar to the templates, so it is actually representing the exact same structure. For example, if you have a page detail, like product detail, you have a CSS file for this, and you also have a template file for this, so you can find things pretty easily. And we also have all the Bootstrap Sass variables and mix-ins available, so you can also use it in your source code. And this brings us to the concept of the Shopware skin mechanism. So in general, the new Storefront is a plain Bootstrap theme. So it is just developed with standard Bootstrap stylings. There are some special things, like for example the off-canvas card, which cannot be handled by plain Bootstrap. But in general, we stick to the default Bootstrap components. So as you can see in this screenshot, this looks like Bootstrap, but it already represents the new Storefront. And on top of this, we have the default Shopware styling. So this is then the actual default theme. And this makes it really easy way to develop, so you can decide if you want to either use the Bootstrap theme and just develop regular Bootstrap stuff, just like many of you might know, or extend from the Shopware default theme. So let's talk about JavaScript. So when you have a Storefront, there's a lot of stuff going on. There is, for example, modal windows. There are some things like an off-canvas card and all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and you want to handle this in a nice way. You don't want to have this all coded in one file or things like that. And that's why we have a plugin system in place. And this plugin system also uses ECMAScript 6 classes. And what we also have for you is a viewport detection. So you can check if the browser is in a certain viewport in your JavaScript part, but I will show you that in a second. So one thing you might ask yourself is, will there be jQuery? So yeah, jQuery will still be available, but only in a slim version. What does this mean? It means that you don't have the animation stuff available in jQuery, and you don't have the Ajax functionality. So it is a really slim version of jQuery which we use. And we only use it for the Bootstrap components. So Bootstrap has currently a dependency on jQuery, and that's why we have it in place. But we recommend you guys to already switch over to the new ES6 stuff, and Bootstrap also has already announced that they, in the next major version, they will remove the jQuery stuff, and then we can do it as well. But currently we have some small things like the Bootstrap modal, which gets called via jQuery. But you can, like I said, use the ES6 stuff today. So speaking of this plugin system, let's have a look at a simple plugin. As you can see here, it is a ECMAScript 6 class, which extends a plugin. So as you can see, there is a base class imported at the first line, and this base class provides you functionality for plugins in general. So it helps you to quickly get along with new plugins. And it has also a magic method. You can think of it like the construct thing in PHP, which is called init, and this gets executed when the plugin actually runs. So this is only a small example. It has no fancy logic in it. It just generates a random color. But just to give you an example how the plugins look like. So, and how to use this? You can import the plugin manager. So this is where the plugin manager comes into play. This is also a helper class which can be imported, and it has a method called register. And this register method can register your previously created plugin. It gets also imported right here. And you can give it any name. You then pass your imported plugin, and you can execute this on a certain selector. So it is pretty familiar to you guys which have already worked with the Shopware 5 plugin system. So in this case, it's only a mySelector simple class. So when it comes to extending plugins, it's also quite straightforward. You also use the ECMAScript 6 mechanism for this. There's also a solution where you can do it without ECMAScript 6, but in this example I wanted to show you the new and cool way, and you basically just import the previously created plugin, and then you can extend from this plugins via vanilla JavaScript. And we are basically just overriding the method which gets the random color. And if we want to use it, we do basically exactly the same. We call the plugin manager, we also import our extended plugin, and we also register it. Okay, so now about the viewport detection. So you have the ability to react to certain viewports in your JavaScript with the viewport detection helper. And you can simply import this. And I only did a bunch of console.logs right there. And the first one gets the name of the current viewport your browser is currently in. And you also have some helper methods as well, which just return a Boolean like am I in the medium viewport or am I in this small viewport. And speaking of these viewports, those are the default viewports from Bootstrap. So you don't have to learn any special viewports right there. And yeah, this is what this gives you in the end. You can just detect everything, and you can use it throughout your JavaScript code. And this is a really nice way to, for example, skip certain code if you don't want to have it on a mobile phone or things like this. Okay, but where do I put my changes in, actually? So you have one possibility, and this is putting your your templates into a custom plugin. So for example, you as a plugin, you might need a template, you can put it inside the plugin. Or you can, when you only want to have a theme, you can also create a simple plugin which has no logic, but only the view and theme stuff. But there's also a cool thing in development right now, which you might know from Shopware 5, and this is the themes folder, and you can put your stuff just like you are already familiar with. You can also put your themes inside this folder. So for example, you can put a swag custom theme right there. And if we have a closer look, there will be a theme.json file, and this is basically the bootstrap or foundation file of your theme. And you can set all your metadata right there and put your assets in, and you can also define from which plugin or theme your assets like CSS should be inherited from. And you can basically control the whole theme from there. So I also want to talk a little bit about developer features, and when it comes to like creating themes or working with templates and stuff like that with front ends in general, there's one thing that might come to your mind instantly, and this is you have to clear some sort of cache when you do changes. Well, nope, not any longer, because we have this fancy thing called hot module replacement. And what this gives you, I have brought you a little video right here, is the possibility to spawn like a server in the background which handles all the changes. And as you can see right here, I'm just changing the color of that button. I'm reassigning this variable, and as you might seen, there's no page reload whatsoever, and within from 1 or 2 seconds your change is already available. And you can also use the Symfony debug tools, because we have full stack Symfony right now. You can use all the things from the Symfony profiler. So for example, in this Twig section, you can of course debug all the Twig templates which are available. And you can also use the dump feature from Twig, which is really handy and gives you nice and syntax highlighted outputs of your object you want to inspect. So you can all do it with the nice and simple Symfony way right now. Okay. So thank you for your time. This is once again the link to the GitHub repository. Feel free to contribute. Give us feedback. We really appreciate it. And if you want to learn more, just scan this QR code. This will take you to the documentation. And you can also have a look at the Getting Started guide, how to set up Shopware and all sorts of stuff. Okay, thank you.
So, questions?
Achso. Wer ist Niklas?
It's okay, Toby.
Yeah.
The people haven't eaten us yet.
So I'm not sure where. There are the microphones. Are there any questions from you guys?
Oh, I see a question right there. Right there. Hi.
Hi. Hi. What browser versions is the Shopware 6 compatible with? Or
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What browser versions, or is there a way to make it compatible with older versions? You know, there are lots of people sadly still using them.
For the new Storefront, it is IE 11. And for the administration, it is Edge.
Yes.
Okay.
Any more questions? Okay, right there. Just a quick reminder. It would be cool if you could just stand up so our guys with the microphones can see you better.
Test. Yeah. Hello. I'm wondering, you don't use stuff like atomic design or naming convention like in the previous Shopware version. Shopware 5, you had a double dash separator or like BAM or something. I'm a little bit disappointed to don't see any, architecture in the front end. Are there any plans for implementing something a little bit more like a system?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that acoustically. A system for what?
Like atomic design and BAM in combination with that. So you have not like a Wild West situation where all the developers are randomly splitting out classes to style their things.
So I'm really sorry, can we just push up the mic a little bit? It's really hard to understand it from here.
Test.
Okay.
No atomic design and no BAM?
Yeah.
Why?
I'm sorry. I think I... Oh, man, I must have misunderstood you. It would be really great if you could just meet us down in the dev lounge.
Okay, yeah.
Because right now, I don't know what it is, but it's somehow hard to hear.
Atomic design verwendet.
Ach, atomic
Okay,
design.
yeah, now I understand.
Oh,
I'm really sorry.
right.
Okay. With BAM, you mean this class convention for CSS? Yes. So we are using this in the administration. There we are using this BAM thing. But inside the storefront, we decided to not use it because it did not correspond really well with the Bootstrap classes. Because the Bootstrap classes are not in that code style, and we thought it would be a bit confusing if you always have to explain, okay, when it is a vanilla Bootstrap class, the one thing is you have to know it, so like btn and btn-primary and things like this. And the other thing is that you have like two types of classes then. So in the administration, we build everything, all components on our own. There we are using it. But we have skipped it in the storefront because of the Bootstrap style.
Hi.
Okay, in Shopware 5, you was able to use snippets and give it a default. And is it possible in Shopware 6 with the translation defaults?
To be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure. We can figure it out later in the developer lounge, but I think that it will work, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, at least for the stuff we provide, English will always be a fallback. And for everything else, it get handled by the Vue plugin. So we'll have to look into that.
I have a question regarding the shop logo Twig template you showed us in the presentation. It shows that there are media queries used for showing different image tags wrapped into a picture tag. And what I learned to love about Shopware 6 is that there's a single source of truth. But as I digged into the code, I saw that the breakpoint constants are given as Twig globals, also in the SCSS as variables, and I guess also in the JavaScript for the view detection. So I guess this breaks there, and will this be fixed somehow?
So, but you're speaking about the storefront?
Yes.
Okay. So, we have these three places where we defined this viewports, but in general, as I said, we stick to the Bootstrap viewports. So they are all the same.
So if I want to change these, I have to override it in the JavaScript, in the CSS, and on the PHP side.
Yeah, I think right now you would have to do it this way, but maybe we can figure out a way to align it with all three technologies, but I'm not sure if it will be that easy. Yeah, not sure.
So is that a promise?
Yeah, of course we can have a look if we can solve this, but those are three completely different, like cases right there. And I'm not sure how to align it, or at which point is the truth inside the PHP or inside the CSS.
So the question will become a research ticket.
Yes.
Great.
Hi, I have actually two questions for the admin. The first question is the component ecosystem you build up.
Yes.
Is it based on some other component library like Vue Bootstrap, or is it build your own?
No, it's completely a homebrew.
Yes.
Okay. And second question is about the translation system. You showed us that the translations are coming from a JSON file. And the question is, how is this file maintained? Is there tooling to auto-create this file and to auto-update this file, or do I have to maintain it manually?
Right now, you have to manually maintain these files. Again, they are not that big in scope because they are just on a per module basis. But we're trying to build some tooling to sync that up automatically so that the JSON objects all have the same form.
Okay. I'm sorry if I missed it, but is there a possibility to override plugins in the storefront?
Yeah, there's actually a possibility to do that. This is also handled right now by the extends mechanism, I'm afraid. So extends is also capable of overwriting plugins. And that's why I skipped it in the presentation, to be honest with you, because it would be a little bit, confusing. But we are already planning to do this by a .override method. So it will just work the same as in the administration as well. So we just left it out in the presentation. Okay. Any more questions?
No?
No?
Okay, anyway, you two will be here the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.